Hi, this is Cath King, back with another episode describing my progress through Dr Will Tuttle's World Peace Diet Facilitator training course. And today, or this past week, in the course, I've been exploring our culture's roots and looking at historically our relationship with animals and how our whole culture is based upon a herding culture, that's the core mentality of our culture, and it's still a herding culture even though it may not look like it today. And I've got some notes here in answers to some of the questions, the study questions that were asked. So I'm just going to go through those notes and talk to them a wee bit. First of all, our core mentality as a herding culture can be seen in language, both the language that we currently use and the language of our past, our history. One word that is in popular usage today is capital, as far as capitalism goes. And capital comes from the Latin word capita. And capita literally means head of cattle. That's what the word capital originally meant, was head of cattle. Another word that is in popular usage today is pecuniary. And that word is also a Latin word, and it comes from the Latin word pecus, P-E-C-U-S. And pecus actually means cattle. One of the words in our past that kind of shows the progression of our culture and our relationship with animals as food is an Aryan Sanskrit word. Their word for war is gavya, and gavya literally means the desire for more cattle. So throughout our history, wars have been fought over cattle. Another word from our culture's past is an ancient Roman word. Denarius is the Roman word for a coin, and this coin was named denarius because it was worth 10 asses. So money was related directly to ownership of animals. And our society is still organised around owning and commodifying animals and, of course, eating them. And I've been looking at how the domestication of animals has led to concepts of ownership, and that this domestication of animals was really the start of capitalism. And in the past, there were many wars that were fought for land and animals. And just as today, power and wealth were concentrated in the hands of the wealthy elite. And nothing much has changed there. And back in our distant past, in our herding culture, and when we first started domesticating animals, this was also the start of gender inequality, as the concepts of male bloodlines became important in animal husbandry. And so it was really quite a small step for cultures to take, to look at women in similar ways to their animals, and to take on this concept of ownership of women the same as they were doing with animals. And there really seems to have been a fundamental shift in values as humans began dominating large and powerful animals. So cultures shifted their worship from fertility goddesses to worshipping more fierce male gods. And so we can kind of see this when you look at archaeology, that the further back you go, that before we started domesticating animals, that our religion was very, very different. Pastoralism requires that we enslave other beings, that we exploit them and eventually kill them. And this has resulted in a kind of psychological hardening over the thousands of years that we've been doing this. And so it's kind of like a hardening or armoring that is valued in patriarchal or dominator type societies like ours. And very easy to see this, especially in New Zealand, where qualities of being a man include being, a hard man and playing rugby and being able to hold your beer, your alcohol. And a lot of those more feminine values have fallen by the wayside and really aren't valued so much anymore. And so, as well as looking at our system of money and our treatment of women and those kind of values around gender and inequality, our relationship with nature also changed from one of immersion in nature to one of separation and control. So not only did we try then, once we domesticated animals and we're controlling animals and controlling women, then people also started trying to control nature and see themselves as being separate from nature. So that hardening and that armoring separated us from nature, whereas before we were a part of the natural community just like every other species on the planet. And of course these days that's now allowed us to do so many things to the natural world, to our ecosystems, to the environment that are not going to be sustainable long term, that are not benefiting us as a species or any other species. And I think Will Tuttle does make a very good point that this really has its roots in this herding culture and at the start when we were trying to dominate and exploit animals. And so today we see that our mentality is still that of a herding culture. We see animals as commodities to be owned, used and eaten. And by extension, nature and natural resources and people are also seen as commodities often. And these values continue to spread through big transnational corporations like Cargill, Fonterra and McDonald's. And this mentality of domination really thrives on emphasizing differences and ignoring similarities. And this viewpoint of others as being different and separate is necessary in order to commit atrocities against them. And there's actually a very good documentary called 5 Steps to Tyranny that examines what's required for a tyrant like Hitler to convince normal, decent people to commit atrocities against others. And one of the steps that's described in this documentary is emphasizing their differences and the importance of those differences. When we look at the situation of the world today, we can see that domination of the underprivileged and unequal and unjust distribution of goods is based on a culture of predation and a value of predation. And we see this in the form of competition and so-called free trade. And rich people in countries like New Zealand, Australia, America, feast on animals that are fattened on grain and fish, while the poor in other countries go hungry. And yet still people talk about their right to eat meat. And if you challenge that right, you're the one that's actually being unjust and unfair. Veganism really is a spiritual and a cultural breakthrough in many ways. And Dr. Tuttle points out that it's quite incredible that anyone actually makes it to being vegan when you look at how strong the conditioning is and how strong the acculturation process is, and all of the things that conspire to keep us eating meat and in this herding culture. And veganism really has its roots in great thinkers like Pythagoras and Plato and Plutarch. In fact, anyone who refrained from eating meat was called a Pythagorean until the term vegetarian was coined in 1850. And after Pythagoras came others like Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, George Bernard Shaw, Emily Dickinson, and many, many others. And all these great thinkers have made significant contributions to our culture, and yet we ignore their genius in regards to the ideas that challenge carnism. Many people admire Pythagoras' ability in mathematics, and yet this same genius that came up with all of his mathematical equations and geometry and all of this, they don't want to know what he thought about eating animals. And the same thing with Gandhi. Many people around the world revere Gandhi as being a spiritual leader, and yet when they look at how he lived his life as a vegetarian, they're not interested. So a change to a vegan lifestyle really reinstates animals to their rightful place in the natural order as thous, not its. So you might remember back to last week's video where I talked about the I thou and the I it mentality and the difference between those two. And animals can then take their place in the natural order as these mysterious and fascinating cohabitants of a shared planet, and something that Thomas Berry and Brian Swim refer to as our kin of the earth community. And being a bit of a rebel, I really love how Dr. Tuttle refers to becoming vegan as a revolution of one, a subversive action against the dominant ideology of violence, patriarchy, domination, separation, capitalism, to an ideology based on loving kindness and mindfulness of our effects on others. So that was my study for this week on our development as a herding culture. And so I'm looking forward to this week's study, and I'll come back to you next week with some more thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe for more videos, and be sure to like and share this video with anyone that you think might benefit. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.